It has been 2 months since the launch of the PlayStation back in 1995. During that time, we had 5 arcade ports, 3 by Namco, and 2 by Midway, a golf game by an infamous company, a game that was originally an exclusive to another system, but later became a multi-release, and we have the first 3 PC ports for the system. However, it is not as strong after the launch lineup. Not to say it's bad, we did have some good and okay games, and one bad one. The reason is that there weren't that many exclusive titles, thus it was mostly lacking. Heck, there were only 5 games in October and most of them were just arcade and PC ports. Until in November, where we got some major exclusive titles and became classics years later. Starting with a game that is a combination between a first-person and platforming. And that's game number 21, Jumping Flash. A game that would be one of the best 32-bit platformer during its time, and the most recognized game not just retro gamers, but casual and indie gamers as well. Published by Sony Computer Entertainment and developed by Exact and Ultra. The story is about an insane astropsychiatrist named Baron Aloha, and somewhat of his henchmen called Mew Mews, who are making a large profit by removing pieces of the land from Crater Planet, so he could turn those land pieces into a private resort. However, the people of the Crater Planet aren't going to take it. So in response, the Universal City Hall dispatches a mechanical rabbit agent named Robbit, and has to go through 6 ships, each grabbing 3 pieces of the land. It's up to you to explore those lands and find the jetpods and stop Baron Aloha's plans to turn them into resorts before it's too late. Its development history began in 1994, after finishing their previous game, Geograph Seal, exclusively and the final title for the Sharp X68000 before moving straight to the PlayStation, by the company Excellent Application Create Team, or Exact to be short, which they are an established PC game developer before turning into a console division after the X68000 was discontinued. The game was first revealed in early 1994 under the provisional title Springman as a technology demonstration for the upcoming PlayStation console. Sony Computer Entertainment hoped that the game would be remembered as the first appearance of a new platform star, with the same longevity as Sonic the Hedgehog or Super Mario. The game uses the same engine and shares similar gameplay traits with Geograph Seal. After seeing the game and realizing the potential in their game design, Sony's director of entertainment in Japan, Koji Tada, paired Exact with Ultra, a computer animation studio, to develop a new game for the upcoming PlayStation console. Tada replaced Hiroyuki Saigusa as director of the game. Although he had kept all the Exact staff to work on the project, the initial development was split into 2 phases, with Exact developed the game engine and its gameplay, while Ultra designed the story and 3D cutscenes. But Ultra felt like they needed to depart from the stereotypical science fiction vibe that included the usual Space Ranger or double agent protagonists. So, to create a sense of individuality among platform games, the developers implemented a dynamic camera that would automatically pan down towards the shadow of Robbit on the ground during large jumps, allowing players to carefully line up their landings. Jumping Flash was considered the first game in the platform genre to be developed with a full 3D computer graphics. At the time was revolutionary and actually felt like you were playing in a 3D world, unlike other games that tried to succeed it, but with mixed results. And finally, the music was composed by Japanese video games and anime music composer Tagio Mariatsu, which many of the tracks, along with tracks from the sequel, were included on the Jumping Flash 2 original soundtrack album, which Mariatsu also composed. But more on that in the review later. When the game was released in Japan in April 28, 1995, Europe in September 29, 1995, again as a launch title over there, and North America in November 10, 1995, it was generally positive and universally praised upon release. Critics mainly praised its unique innovation, advanced graphics, gameplay, and clean textures. 4 reviewers of Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it their Game of the Month award, citing the outstanding graphics and particularly the innovative 3D gameplay, as they described the style as cutesy but not off-putting. Major Mike of GamePro said that despite the games appearing strange, it had action strategy and some humor. Next Generation said that many of the boundaries have been redefined in a big way, contrasting it with side-scrolling platformers with a first-person perspective and explorable 3D environments. They called it simply superb and gave it a revolutionary 5-star rating. And finally, Maximum stated that Jumping Flash was one of the most imaginative, playable, enjoyable, and original titles seen on the 5th generation video game consoles, although did criticize its length and lack of difficulty, expressing that it could have been one of the greatest games ever if it was longer and more difficult, and questioned where it was a really worthwhile purchase. Outside of its reviews, it was awarded in the 32-bit Game of the Year as PlayStation Game of the Year. It was number 86 in Next Generation's Top 100 Games of All Time a year later, after it's released, and was even featured in the Guinness World Record Video Games Edition 2008 as the first platform video game in true 3D. And people are still giving praise to this very day, like indie developer Matt Thorson, the creator of Towerfall, praised the game, saying something about the sensation of leaping through 3D space captured my childhood imagination. And even OneUp.com cited that the game would be a precursor to EA's Mirror's Edge, despite suggesting that the jumping remained woefully out of place in the platform genre. So, with all the critical praise from the past, will it be still praised in the present day? Well, let's get on to the review. The graphics, even though it's pixelated and blocky, like always, actually manages to age well due to the fact that the game isn't trying to be realistic like other games, and with a colorful / cartoonish style, making it more stand out from the crowd. And the other thing to point out is the skybox. I may be alone on this one, but I think it's actually nice to look at, even if it's mostly dated compared to other PlayStation titles like the original Spyro Trilogy. The only thing I have a problem is the frame rate. When you start playing, the frame rate isn't 30 frames per second like most early 3D games. But however, when you perform a double jump, the frame rate jumps up to 60 frames per second when you fall down, and once you land on something, it lowers back to 30 frames per second. I don't know why the developers decided to switch up the speed for the frame rate. Maybe because they want the players to land on the platforms correctly and wanting to speed it up. But if that's the case, then why not make the entire game's frame rate 60 frames per second instead of 30 frames per second? Who knows, maybe they couldn't do that back in the day. The presentation is good. The FMV cutscenes by Ultra are alright, with the animation being okay, but the characters don't really move that much, mostly Baron Aloha and the Mew Mews, but it's just fine overall. The first person hub looks great. The 2D character sprite in the bottom middle looks great. Whenever if you get a jet pod or gotten hit, he does a little animation either jumping or his ears lowering down, which is a fine touch. The ball in the upper middle is also great. If you jump or jump twice, the ball starts to move using a spring attached, and once you land back down, it bounces for a few seconds, until it stops, although minor is still a nice touch. And also keeping track of the jet pods, which the white bars turn red if you got one. And the rest are fine, with the weapons you have and a map to find the jet pods. And finally, there's the time attack mode, which is basically just exploring a level again, but you're on a time limit and have to beat a record. And that's pretty much it. The music is fantastic, though not one of my favorites outside of World 1-1 and World 6-3, aka the final boss theme. It's still an enjoyment to listen to, either having a good day or want to be cheered up if you have a bad day. And finally, the gameplay. The controls are easy to handle and feels tight to move, though they could have added in strafing, but oh well. As for the levels that you need to traverse, they start out easy with getting used to the control layout, until later on you need to reach platforms as high as you can, or distance by double jumping correctly, but luckily it isn't a problem because again, tight controls. And at every level you see a ring with the word bonus in the middle. Touch it and you'll teleport to the bonus stage, where you have to shoot down the balloons before time runs out. However, most of the bonus rings are very hard to track down, including later worlds. So with that, the rating score would be higher since there's nothing wrong with the game, but however, the two cons that sort of pull back the score is 1. The cash is pretty much useless in the game. All they ever do is just for getting scores for the game, but at least you get a 1-up once in a while, but still meaningless. And 2 is that after you beat it for the first time, you have to beat it again in extra mode, which is just the same thing, but the jackpots were placed in different locations, except for the maze levels where they have changed the layout of the world. But only 2 levels does that, since they are the only maze levels. I'm guessing why the developers did this by playing it again, either that the game would be too short, like under an hour or 2, or they didn't have enough time making more levels and just duplicating them as an extra mode before the deadline. But hey, that's just a theory of mine. Now on to the conclusion. The game is really great and very addicting, with the graphics, though pixelated and minor frame rate problem, has aged well, despite being dated due to the 3D looked back then. The presentation is good, with some details added. The music is very good and enjoy to listen to. And the gameplay controls are great and again, tight. However, I wish they could have just added in like 2 or 3 more worlds instead of just playing the game again, and I know it tried to switch it up, but still, you're just doing the exact same thing, and the coins are pretty much useless and just for getting a high score. But hey, at least I had a good time playing the game. So what happens after that? Well, the series did spawn 2 sequels, with the second that we only got in America, while the third one was only exclusive to Japan only, as well as a spin-off featuring the Mew Mews from the series. But again, Japan only. So, as for this game, it is so far one of the best PlayStation 1 games from 1995, and a must-play, either getting a physical copy or emulating it if you like to play as a robotic rabbit jumping around the areas over and over again. I give my official rating a 5 out of 6. Next time on the PlayStation Years, we have an official company debut straight from Salt Lake City named single track, and released their first 2 games in the exact same day, with the first one being an arcade-style flight combat game and was supposed to be Sony's major killer app for the system in North America and sooner or later the world. What is that game? Well, I'll tell you in the next review. Thanks for watching.